Let me ask you something. When was the last time you started something? Not finished something, not built something that lasted, not created something that compounded. Started something. Maybe it was a new business idea, a side project, a newsletter, a content brand, an app concept that you'd sketched in notes at midnight, a productivity system you were absolutely convinced would be the final one. Most of them will never ever make their first dollar. Now, when was the last time you actually finished it? I'm not asking this question to embarrass you. I'm asking this because I've personally been there many times, and for the longest time, I didn't understand why I kept doing it, why I kept starting, why the beginning always felt super electric and the middle felt like some kind of suffocation, and at the end was some distant country I never quite reached. At first, I tagged all of this as a discipline problem. I thought it was some kind of motivational problem, a strategy problem maybe. Turns out that it wasn't any of those things. It was a dopamine problem. And I think if you're being honest with yourself, it might be yours too. This isn't a video about productivity hacks. I'm not going to tell you to start a morning routine. I'm not going to tell you to wake up at 5 am or build a second brain or even to attempt a 75-day hard challenge. This is a video about something much more uncomfortable. It's about the psychological trap at the center of modern ambition. The hidden addiction that is quietly hollowing out an entire generation of founders, creators, and builders. The thing no one is talking about because the thing itself has been disguised as virtue. Folks, in today's day and age, we've confused motion with progress. We've confused stimulation with work. We've confused starting with actually building something. And do you know the most dangerous part? The whole world is actually quietly rewarding us for it. Think about the last time you had a new business idea. Not the one that you've actually been building for about 18 months. Not the one that requires spreadsheets and cold calls and customer support emails at 9 pm. The new one, the fresh one, the one that just arrived. You know exactly what I'm talking about. There's this particular quality to a new idea. It almost feels physical, a warmth behind this tantrum, a kind of clarity suddenly for the very first time in weeks. You know exactly what you should be doing. Your mind starts running, the possibilities start stacking. You see the product page, you can see the audience, you can see the version of yourself actually building this thing. You've actually not done anything yet, but you feel that you're already very successful. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this feeling has a name and it's called dopamine anticipation. Your brain doesn't actually care about the achievement, it cares about the prediction of the achievement. The moment you imagine a positive future outcome, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter of desire, of pursuit, of this matters and you should actually keep going. This is actually ancient wiring. This is the same mechanism that made your ancestors chase prey. The hit of neurochemical motivation that said there is something good ahead, move toward it. But here's what evolution didn't anticipate. In 2025, you can stimulate the entire journey of achievement, the idea, the vision, the identity, the imagined success, without ever doing a single day of real work or work that actually matters. You can buy the domain, register the LLP, make a logo on Canva, write the first LinkedIn post, do market research maybe, build the Notion workspace, read the books, join the Discord community, attend the conferences and all of the networking events that people keep talking about, tweet about what you're actually building. And your brain, your ancient pattern matching dopamine soaked brain cannot tell the difference between working on the thing and actually performing the thing. It all registers everything as progress. The new idea doesn't threaten you. The new idea is pure possibility. Nothing has gone wrong yet. No one has said no. No growth curve has actually disappointed you. The market hasn't spoken for you yet. The product isn't embarrassingly buggy. The customers aren't churning. In the beginning, nothing can hurt you because nothing is quite real yet. And so, the brain, wired for survival, allergic for pain, quietly learns a lesson. It starts feeling better than continuing. It feels that starting is actually more better than continuing. Not because continuing is worst, but because continuing is where reality begins. Continuing is where the gap between your vision and your execution becomes undeniable. Continuing is where you find out that the idea wasn't the hard part, you were the hard part. And rather than facing that discomfort, the brain does what the brain actually is best at doing. It goes ahead and finds the next idea to sit on. Here is something nobody wants to say out aloud, right? The internet doesn't reward builders. The internet goes on to reward performers, and I've spoken about this multiple times in my previous videos. There is an entire economy, a vast, sophisticated, deeply seductive content economy built entirely around the appearance of entrepreneurship, around the theater of ambition, around performing founded identity for a specific set of audience. And if I go to look at today's social media and its algorithm, it's essentially everywhere. It's the founder on Twitter posting their daily word count, their MRR dashboard, their morning routine, their failures, their wins, their pivots, their lessons learned. It's the newsletter writer documenting their audience's growth every single week. It's the podcasters whose interview have gone viral and he's interviewed close to 200 guests but hasn't shipped a single piece of product. Is the person with about $50,000 in productivity setup, right? The mechanical keyboard, the studio, the microphone, the iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil, who has been working on their app for about 3 years and has made no significant or real progress. I need to be careful here. Building in public can be legitimate. Documenting your journey can attract real customers, real accountability, real community, and I'm not trying to dismiss that entire fact. What I'm pointing out towards is something that is much more subtler, something that looks like building in public but is not actually building in public. The difference in the sequence is real building in public is essentially you building and then you share. Performance entrepreneurship, which we are worshipping these days, is first you share, then you feel like you've actually built it. The audience is the product, the metrics are the meaning, the identity is the business, and when the content starts performing, when the LinkedIn post gets about 50,000 impressions, when the tweet that you actually tweeted goes viral, when the followers tick up, the brain gets a dopamine that hit of something that is very, very dangerous. It gets a hit of the functionally indistinguishable feeling of achievement and distraction from real traction that actually matters. Except this isn't traction, it's just attention. And attention, ladies and gentlemen, is not business. And this is a fundamental rule I think that a lot of us are actually forgetting. Then comes the research trap. Oh, the research trap. I know a lot of you are familiar with this one. You've lived this one, right? The perpetual intake loop, another podcast episode, another book, another YouTube video about the productivity systems, another course, another thread of everything I know about cold call outreach, another AI tool to explore, another framework to finally understand before you can lay down the foundations of your business. Learning for most of us and how it's actually advertised on internet actually feels like working, and in the modern information economy the supply of things to learn is genuinely infinite. There is always another podcast, always another framework, always another person much more successful than you who is genuinely explaining exactly how they did it. So you listen and you take notes and you build your Notion system and you tag and organize and synthesize, and you feel at the end of 8 hours day and an entire day you have been productive. You haven't, you just have been stimulated. There's a version of this that's even more indistinguishable, and that is the AI tools era. I say this as someone who uses AI tools constantly and finds them genuinely transformative. But there is a particular kind of person, and I've been this person in the past, who uses AI tools not to build, but to stimulate building an accelerated, convincing level, a business that he wants to establish, who uses ChatGPT to generate the business plan, Claude to write the landing page, Midjourney for the branding identity, Notion AI to draft the first investor's memo, and at the end, he has a beautifully organized, remarkably detailed, emotionally convincing document describing a business that fundamentally does not exist at all. And here, ladies and gentlemen, is where I'm having my problems. The output looks like progress, it feels like progress, right? It generates enough internal rewarding and external validation that the brain says, good work today, we're actually building something, we're making some progress. We're not building, we're just dreaming in high definition 4K. Here is the hardest truth in this entire video. The internet rewards visible hustle, right? Reality actually goes on to reward invisible repetition, and these are not the same thing. They're almost perfectly opposite things, and because we live so much of our lives in the modern internet era where the metrics are immediate, where the feedback loops is almost instant, right? Where performance effort is rewarding as highly as producing results. we've begun to confuse them at a fundamental neurological level. We have trained ourselves to optimize for the performance of work rather than the quality and the output of the work itself. I want to go somewhere uncomfortable now because everything I've said so far could be dismissed as some productivity problem, a distraction problem, a social media problem, maybe. And it's not, it's actually a psychological problem. It runs deeper than any of these explanations will ever last. And until you understand why execution is so psychologically threatening, no productivity system in the world, ladies and gentlemen, and mark my words, no productivity system in the world will actually help you to ever escape this. Here is what execution does that brainstorming fundamentally never does. It commits you. The moment you stop researching and start shipping, you have made a statement about your own abilities. The idea is no longer hypothetical. The product is no longer protected by the beautiful fog of its potential or its TAM or its audience bases. You've drawn a clear line in reality, and now the reality gets to respond, and reality might say a no. Brainstorming fundamentally can never fail. Let me explain. Because an idea in your head is perfect, because the only person who's actually evaluating it is the person who's actually created it. But execution exposes you to an audience that you cannot fundamentally control. Customers, the market, the competitors, the critics, the cold indifference of a world that you didn't notice when you actually launched that particular product. The ego knows this, and the ego quietly, powerfully, beneath the level of conscious thought, steers you away from that particular exposure. It tells you, do more research, do more planning, do more refinement. Not yet, we're not ready to launch. We're almost ready, and it just needs one more iteration because before we actually finally launch this to the market. This is not laziness. I want to be clear about that. The founders I've watched fall into this trap are some of the most hardworking, passionate, intelligent people that I might know in my entire lifetime. And at a fundamental level, they are definitely not lazy. They are actually afraid, and their fears have been disguised even from themselves, and they try to call it as diligence. There's something else here that I want to talk about, something about identity, and this changes the whole perspective about how we actually see problems. Modern entrepreneurship has become, for many people, primarily identity and not a practice. It's become an identity, and identities are actually fragile things. They require constant maintenance, they require external validation, right? They require a coherent story that needs to be told on a LinkedIn profile and in a conference bio, or answers to what you actually do for a living. The idea of being a founder is genuinely intoxicating in 2026. There's status in it, there's romance in it, the startup hoodie, the WeWork aesthetic, the mission statement, the disruption vocabulary that every single founder is today using on Instagram, the casual mention of your cap table and trying to claim that you can capture the entire cap table, or even giving validation to the whole thought that that cap table is actually real. There is an entire cultural mythology built around this identity of founders, creators, right? And it is a mythology that you can inhabit without having built a single thing, which means for many people the identity has replaced the whole work, and that is something that is very, very dangerous. The performance has eaten the craft, and then there's the thing nobody will say: repetition feels like death. Not metaphorically, I mean this almost psychologically. The experience of doing the same thing day after day, without novelty, without external reward, without the dopamine hit of a new idea or a viral post or an exciting pivot, feels genuinely, viscerally awful to certain kind of brains, and that's completely fine. The whole thing is you should be able to acknowledge this before you're able to take action on this. And founders, creators, and ambitious people, they tend to be exactly of that kind of brain: high sensation seeking, high novelty bias, high need for stimulation. These are often the same traits that made them want to build the things in the first place. The inability to accept the status quo, the relentlessness, the hunger, right? But those traits are a double-edged thing, because the same relentlessness that starts companies also abandons them. The same novelty hunger that generates the idea also reaches for the next idea the moment the current one becomes very familiar and is not interesting or exciting enough to work on. The founder's greatest asset and greatest liability are the same psychological feature, right? And it's about the founder of acknowledging this trait and actually parting ways with what actually matters. Here is something I haven't said out loud, but here is something that I fundamentally know is true, and this is just based on my whole experience and my whole thought process. Many people, and I include my past self in this, are afraid of failure. They're afraid to be ordinary. Deep down, beneath the business plan and the startup story and the mission statement that we continuously keep talking about, there is a terror of discovering that building something real looks for long stretches like nothing glamorous at all. Then it looks like answering the same customer support email for the 200th time, tweaking the same landing page for the 40th time, running the same ad for 6 months back to back in a row, going to the same desk, opening the same file, and doing the same thing again and again. The dream was significant, right? The reality is actually repetition, and many people choose the dream. I spent the last year paying attention to people who actually build some incredible things. Not the loudest people, not the ones who have the biggest audiences on YouTube, Instagram, or have a lot of followers on LinkedIn, the most viral posts or the most compelling personal brands, the ones who have actually built solid fundamental businesses, ones who have actually products that people actually pay for, ones who actually have organizations that survive, compound, and grow. And what I've noticed is not what I've expected. They are almost, without exception, absolutely boring. Not boring as people, some of them are fascinating, but boring as performance of entrepreneurship. They don't have the best LinkedIn presence. They often are not at conferences or networking events. They're not particularly well known outside their specific domain. They're not constantly announcing pivots or new direction or exciting updates. They are just consistently, quietly, stubbornly doing their work. The real builders I've observed share something that is harder to cultivate than any other skill: emotional stability in the face of repetition. The ability to sit with something that is not exciting, to continue doing what works even when doing what works is boring, to resist the seduction and the pull of novelty, not through willpower essentially, not through grinding through the pain, but through a genuine understanding that this moment right here, this ordinary, unsexy, repetitive moment is where compounding actually starts and compounding actually happens. Compounding, that word. Everyone in the startup world knows about compounding. Everybody can fundamentally explain it. The hockey stick curve, the exponential, the flywheel, the network effect. Everyone nods at these concepts in pitch decks and talk a lot about this on podcasts, right? But very few people have actually felt compounding within. Because compounding requires something that is profoundly uncomfortable for a certain kind of brain. It requires patience with invisibility. For a long time, often a very long time, compounding produces nothing you can point to. The work goes in, the days accumulate, the iterations happen, the graph is flat. Sometimes it doesn't just feel flat, it looks flat, almost looks flat by every measurable metric, and it fundamentally shows you that nothing is really happening. And this is precisely the moment, ladies and gentlemen, when most people actually stop or give up. Not because the strategy is wrong, not because the market doesn't want the product, but because the psychological cost of continuing without visible rewards exceeds what they're willing to bear. And this is a conditioning that has actually been inputted through us through modern algorithms, and this is what it has been teaching us. In reality, what really works is the opposite approach. The people who actually make it through the stretch are not any kind of superhuman. They're not grinding on willpower alone. They've just somehow, either through temperament or hard experience, developed a relationship with work that is not dependent on external feedback or external validation. They're not doing the work to feel something. They're doing the work because it compounds, and they trust the compounding even when they can't see the results, especially when they can't see the results. Real builders are craftspeople, and craftspeople have a different relationship with work than performers actually do. A performer asks, how does this look? A craft person asks, is this right? A performer optimizes for audience. A craft person optimizes for the thing itself. The performer's work is actually social. The craft person's work is private. Not because they don't care about impact, they often care more deeply about impact than any person alive, but because they understand that the quality of the private works determine the quality of the public result. And so the private work gets the best and the most strongest in the fundamental arts, which is the deepest attention, the most honest evaluation. There's a passage I keep thinking about. Ira Glass, the radio producer, talks about this gap, and this exists for every creative person early in their careers. The gap between your taste and your ability. You got into this work because you have good taste. You know what good looks like. But for a very long time, and sometimes within years, your ability doesn't match your taste. And you have to keep going through that gap without stopping, without abandoning the ship, without abandoning the main mission that actually got you started. Most people never do, and the ones who actually do, the ones who endure the gap, who keep refining, who keep showing up even when the output is still embarrassingly far from the version that they'd put in their mind, those are the ones who eventually are going to make it. This is the unsexy truth about every success story that you've ever admitted. Strip away the narrative, the founding myth, the original story with its moments of genius and serenity, right? What's underneath is always the same thing: long, quiet, constant, often joyless, often unrewarded, often lonely repetition executed by someone who refused to stop. That's it. That is the whole thing. We're living in the most stimulating environment in the history of human civilization. Every hour, there are thousands of new ideas to discover, new tools to explore, new people to learn from, new opportunities to consider, new identities to actually try on, new starting lines to stand behind, and all of this is competing for the same finite resources: your sustained attention. The attention economy has done something profound to ambitious people. It has made them starting free and continuing expressiveness, right? It has made novelty abundant and depth rare. It has made beginnings of things very easy and the middle of things almost unbearably hard. Because the middle of the things doesn't reward you, it just asks you more. More patience, more trust, more repetition, more showing up, more ordinary days, more faith that the invisible work is accumulating into something real. I want to say something to you directly. If you're someone who has started a lot of things and finished very few, I'm not judging you. I'm describing myself 3 years ago, and to some extent, still, right? Because I still feel I'm narrowing through that journey, I'm passing through that journey. The pull toward novelty is not a character flaw. The love of ideas is not a weakness. The excitement of starting is not the problem. The only problem, is mistaking that excitement for the thing itself, mistaking the dopamine of the new idea for the satisfaction of the finished work. The excitement is actually the invitation. It is supposed to get you started. It was never supposed to sustain you throughout that entire journey. That's not what excitement is for. What sustains you, what has to sustain you if you're going to build anything real, is something different, something that isn't a feeling at all. Really, it's more like a decision, a commitment made quietly, privately, without an audience. A commitment that says, I will continue with the thing even if it stops feeling new. I will continue even when the metrics are flat. I'll continue even when the shiner area arrives. I will continue when continuing feels like nothing, because I've decided that this is the thing I'm actually building, and I'm going to fundamentally go on to build it till the very end. The world has no shortage of people with great ideas, and I think a lot of people have said this, and I personally believe that a lot of you will agree to this, right? The world has no shortage of people who are passionate, curious, talented, and ambitious. What the world is desperately, urgently short of are people who are willing to be boring in the service of something great. People who can sit in a room without an audience, without applause, without dopamine, without anybody who's actually supporting them, and do the ordinary, repeated, unsexy work that everything you admire was actually built from. Every product that has gone to fundamentally change your life was mostly built in the same grounds, in the remarkable months and in the years between the exciting founding moments and the eventual success story is the hours that were never photographed, right? Never tweeted, never documented, never celebrated, or never spoken about in a podcast that you actually watch and compare yourself with. In the hours, what fundamentally happened was just quite stubbornly happened, right? Your business doesn't care about your excitement. It doesn't care about your notion system. It doesn't care about your personal brand. It doesn't care about how many podcasts you've actually listened to, or how many books that you've read, or how compelling your founder story is to a pitch, right? It only cares about one thing: what you did today and yesterday and the day before that, and whether you'll actually come back tomorrow with the same energy. The most radical thing that you can do in a world addicted to starting, ladies and gentlemen, is to just fucking continue.